Hi, and welcome to Alive with Chronic Illness, a podcast dedicated to exploring what it's like to live with and not in spite of chronic illness. In today's episode, we're going to explore gentle goal setting, and I'm joined by the amazing chronic illness coach, Caitlin Oliver. Thank you so much for joining me today, Caitlin. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm really keen to have a chat with you about goal setting because it is such a difficult thing when you have a chronic illness and you're trying to navigate that. I'd love it if you would tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Caitlin, and I've lived with fibromyalgia for, I guess we're coming up to almost 8 years now, among some other invisible conditions. And my background is in environmental engineering. So I've worked a lot in like environmental conservation and recycling, waste management. But I also coach people. I'm a life and empowerment coach for primarily people with chronic illness, just helping folks to navigate their professional and personal goals, but through more of a nervous system informed approach.
Amazing. So goal setting is quite a big theme then in your day-to-day work with your coaching.
Yeah, it's a big deal also just for like personally for myself as someone with chronic illness who has goals and wants to achieve things, but has had to learn the hard way through a lot of trial and error, how to adjust my approach to my goals.
And what does that adjustment look like for you so far?
Less rigidity. I think we're all kind of probably familiar with SMART goals, and that's not always realistic when you're living with chronic illness. And so I think just more focusing on the kind of the direction of where I want to go and like what is the vision I have for what I'm doing, but being more flexible with how I get there and having a lot more self-compassion, doing a lot more bite-sized pieces, really having to check in my body and see how I'm feeling. And yeah, it's a journey for sure, because it's one of those things too where we all have goals, we want to accomplish things. It's easy with chronic illness, like push yourself too hard. And then you get into like the shame spiral of like, I can't do anything. And then that almost causes you to freeze and not do things. And so it's really like, how can we work with our nervous system and take and challenge ourselves, but not dysregulate ourselves?
Yeah, and I think like when you picked up on there, that kind of working with your nervous system, there's often a lot of pressure, I think, maybe attached to goals, particularly if you look at traditional goal setting, like myself, when I've Googled before looking at things I wanted to achieve, there's always this pressure that you have to be doing things like really quickly. Or you see other people
Hmm.
doing something similar to what you want to do and they're achieving it at a different rate. And I think that it can be quite difficult to be able to set goals for yourself that don't then lead to you pushing yourself too far and then getting stuck in that cycle and that are
Hmm.
sustainable, particularly because sometimes it can feel frustrating when you want to achieve something sooner.
For sure. And then you can get like limiting beliefs, like, oh, maybe I'm just not capable of doing this. And I recently wrote a blog post about my journey learning Spanish, and I really that was an example of how I had to really reframe kind of work, how I approached that goal, because how it worked for other people was not going to work for me with brain fog and everything else. And I really took on this belief, like maybe I'm not capable of learning the language. And it was like, no, I'm just maybe going to take a little slower to get there. Maybe some days won't look as good as other days. We also kind of had this belief with goals that like we'll arrive there and it'll be like we're done, we're complete. But like just like chronic illness, we're going to have some ups and downs, and not all days are going to be good days.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is acknowledging that there's going to be good days, bad days, and things are going to feel different at different times. When it comes then to learning a language, was there anything that you did or anything you changed to your approach, or was it mainly just thinking of taking that pressure off yourself that you have to achieve it at a certain pace?
Learning about the nervous system was really helpful for me because it did give me a lot more self-compassion. First of all, just recognizing that, yeah, like with fibromyalgia, we have like brain fog and there's a lot more fatigue and just difficulty with mental processing. So of course it was going to like be hard to memorize things. Also, when with fibromyalgia and a lot of chronic illnesses, we are almost chronically dysregulated. We are outside of our window of tolerance, which is kind of the area where you can best navigate emotional arousal. And so we're in a hyperactive like stress response often already, and that's not conducive to learning. So I had to have a lot more self-compassion with myself and had to work on like how can I get myself back into the place where I can actually effectively learn. It was recognizing like some default strategies that like I have a little like anxiety. And so when I was in social situations and someone would talk to me in Spanish and it was very loud, I would freeze. And then after I would like feel the shame, like, but I do know how to respond. Like I know the words and so I think it's just a lot of I think the first step to like achieving kind of any goal is like really understanding what are some of your barriers and like an understanding that it's not like that you're dumb or incapable or whatever. It's that your nervous system is trying to protect you. And that's been your default strategy when you're nervous is to freeze. So I think that was an important thing. Once I understood that, and then just working to so I had in my calendar, I'd be like, I'm gonna do 2 hours a day of studying. Like that's really not realistic. And so I started to do like smaller bite-sized pieces. And this is true for learning anything. Sometimes it wouldn't be just sitting and focusing if cognitively I wasn't there. It was sometimes like cooking and like saying the names of the ingredients while I was cooking in Spanish, just trying to infuse the language learning throughout the day so that I felt like that I was moving forward, but it wasn't so rigid.
Yeah, and I love that idea about reframing your kind of thoughts around your nervous system as this thing that's trying to protect you and sort of working with that to try and get out of that cycle so that you can still, do the things you want to do, but also having that compassion that this is, in a sense, an amazing capacity our bodies have to protect us, even though it doesn't necessarily serve us in these situations.
For sure. And neuroplasticity, like anytime we take on a new experience or we're learning something, we are able to change our brain structures. So I think it's just like letting go of like when this is gonna, like when whatever skill you're gonna learn is gonna happen. It doesn't have to like, I mean, it'll be fluent in 3 months. No, like don't focus on that. Focus on I'm going to learn and I'm going to enjoy this process and I'll get there. I'll get to wherever it's going to be. But I'm making progress. And I think that we focus sometimes on like, yeah, the end result, being fluent, being skilled in guitar, being whatever it may be, getting that promotion, and we don't focus so much on like the journey to get there, which should be fun as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like that end point is just one point. It's going to be a long journey to get to that. So if you can enjoy what
Hmm.
you're doing and really feel passionate about it, that definitely helps with motivation.
For sure.
And I think that's another thing with SMART goals, like that kind of like in a timely manner and thinking about time frames is quite heavy on traditional goal setting approaches. It's like, when are you going to achieve this by perhaps taking that off, and what might you feel like when you achieve this? What does that look like for you? And maybe the achievement in a lot of things is actually the experience of doing it, of learning.
For sure. And like you also don't know what could open up as you're doing that journey, right? You could discover you enjoy something else or something, there's a new direction that or detour or whatever. Like there's a lot of interesting parts of the journey that can arise if we're open to it rather than being sort of like rigidly focused. And yeah, I think SMART goals can be helpful for some folks, but if you're already a little dysregulated, I think it can be actually like too much for people. And yeah, and maybe prevent us from doing anything at all, which is a shame.
So if someone came to you and they were looking for advice on how to set themselves some goals, is there a structure that you prefer, or is it very flexible and fluid, whatever the person likes and works for them really?
Yeah, I think more the second one, but I think first really getting clear on like clarity on what it is you want to do. And I think for there's two kind of ways I look at it is like what are your values? I think it's really important. I think that's something that especially if you're dealing with setbacks, which can happen with chronic illness, it's really easy to lose motivation. But when your goals are aligned to your values, something that like was really important to you, something that like the way you want to live your life, it's a little bit easier to get back on track. And then also looking at the qualities that you already embody or the qualities that you really want to nurture and have in the future. So I think those two things are very important. And then if people aren't really sure of like, there's so many things, like what could I do? I think like good old fashioned like journaling and brainstorming just to like get all your thoughts and ideas out are really can be really helpful and not putting any edits on like what you write down. And then you can really kind of see, oh, is there like patterns? Like what is, and then kind of from there figuring out what is your priority and what is also realistic with your capacity at the moment. So like, we want to like stretch our nervous system, but we don't want to like override all of our limitations or all of our brain body like limitations. And so like looking and being like, okay, what is maybe that goal is like great for next year or for when I'm feeling better, but like what is something that I can like do right now that makes me excited, that I like that's aligned with my values, that I have the qualities or that I want to embody those qualities, and then start from there.
Yeah, so maybe part of it is thinking about that goal. And if you actually come to it and think, well, this is a goal that I have and I really want to achieve it, but I know that's not achievable for me right now.
Mhm.
Thinking about, is there something else that's linked to that goal that you can achieve right now and that you can do now? And it will kind of, I guess then there's motivation and enjoyment in the doing of it. Because even like we speak about sort of learning a
Yeah.
language, I'm still trying, I'm trying to learn Welsh. I find it quite challenging to learn
Oh,
languages
cool.
because of brain fog. But I realized
Yeah.
like my goal is to learn Welsh, and I am learning Welsh, certainly slowly, but it is happening.
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
learning is happening. I'm achieving the goal. I might not be able to say very much, but I am learning in that process and sort of seeing that as not as like the end goal, but like I'm already achieving the goal because I'm already trying to do that. So I think that's quite a nice way to reframe it because it can be quite scary to think about setting goals of chronic illness, particularly if you've got a condition that can change really quickly or maybe could
Hmm.
deteriorate. You might not know what is achievable for you in a year's time.
Oh, for sure. And I think just when you're saying about learning Welsh, I think something too that's important when is like breaking down our goals, obviously into small bite-sized pieces, which is true for anyone, but also like celebrating every win. So like every time hear a word and you know what that word means, or every time you're able to like have a conversation, even if you make mistakes, like that's still something to celebrate. That's pretty cool. It's something that you couldn't have done previously to learning the language, right? So I think that that is a really important step is and why it's important not to focus so much on like the end result of fluency or whatever your goal may be, because you miss the opportunity to celebrate all of your little wins along the way.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Those little moments and just sort of acknowledging how much you've achieved in everything you do, because it is, we often do focus on that last, like, I'm going to do this because I want to do this one thing, and that's the goal. But actually, there's so
Mhm.
many amazing milestones on that journey and so many different things that you're learning along the way and so many achievements. And I do think that we should celebrate that more, just generally as society. I'm big on people
Oh, for sure.
achieve like if you've achieved something or celebrate, whatever it is you want to celebrate because yeah, it is tough. And it is tough to balance things with chronic illness. So I think those little wins are so important.
For sure. They're huge motivators. And I think celebrating the wins and then having self-compassion when there's setbacks or things don't always work out, I think that's really key to not getting into like the shame spiral of an example I can think of is I used to like do a lot of ecstatic dance. Are you familiar with ecstatic dance?
Oh.
It's basically like freestyle dance where you just go to an event and someone's playing like a DJ's playing music. It's all improvised in the moment of how you feel, you move, and there's no structured steps. And so I went to I love dancing, but my body wasn't always up for it. But I finally got to the point where I'm like, I'm good to go. Went to my first event. It was in a lot of pain after, but it was like really fun. And I kept going back each week. And some weeks I just like didn't mentally or physically have it in me. I would like leave partway through, or I would just sit and watch people for the whole time. And I think that like that kind of made me really, when I was thinking about our conversation we were going to have, I thought like to me that really felt like goal setting in like a healthy way of like I kept showing up. If I had viewed not dancing as a failure, I would have probably just been like, forget it, that's not for me, or I can't do it. But I really saw that every time, every dance is going to look different. And that's true for everybody. And just keep showing up and honor where I'm at in that moment. If I just want to like lay on the ground the whole time, that's what I was feeling. And that's fine. I showed up. And when I did that too, I think I opened me up to like other, I don't know, the possibilities we talked about earlier of like connection with others. Even like watching others dance was like super fun and really beautiful. Like there was other things I started to enjoy about my experience. And so yeah, I think that when we're so rigid of like, and that's, I'm going to work out this many times a week. I'm going to like, and this is what it's going to look like. I'm going to like increase my reps. I'm going to run further. You kind of push yourself. I think the goal really should be like, I'm going to show up. I'm going to put my sneakers on and I'm going to go out. And if I only walk around the block, that's okay. Like I have to honor where my body and my brain is at. So,
I love that. The goal is showing up, and I think that that's so true. Just being there in that moment, whatever that looks like for you.
hmm. Yeah. And then because then you feel I was more likely to show up than if I was going to shame myself, like to keep. And I did that for a year until I moved and I loved it. So, I think that, yeah, we need to honor wherever we're at and we need to be okay with not always, not like, it's not going to be, progress isn't going to be linear. We need to be okay with that.
Yeah. And I think that is so important, isn't it? And I think you touched on there that shame is like something I hear about a lot, and I think a lot of people carry shame that is not theirs to carry. And I wonder, like, how often does that come in for you? So when you're working with your clients, is shame a big motivator for certain goals, or perhaps even like a shame of not achieving those goals? Is it kind of works its way, I suppose, in a lot of different ways?
Yeah, I think it could be a motivator for some people. I think it really depends on the person and their nervous system, their attachments, their personality, their lifestyle. There's lots of different, but I think like as a whole, like shame and perfectionism are really like interlinked. And I think that as a whole, we're carrying shame and perfectionism so much, we're going to end up being, it's almost similar to burnout to get to the point where like it's not going to be productive anymore. And I think it's better when we're motivated by passion, by excitement, by purpose, by this is good for me, this is good for others, than like I have to do this or I'm not enough. But yeah, I think that that may work in the short term, but not really in the long term.
Yeah, I was thinking like when we spoke about shame about a lot of people maybe have goals that are motivated by they don't feel like they're doing enough or they're not enough of something or they should be doing something specific and that's why they're
Hmm.
doing it. Not for themselves. It's not a goal they put because they want to do it or because it makes them happy, but because they feel like if they achieve this goal, then it's going to take away these feelings and it's they're going to feel, I don't know, maybe good enough. And I think that's quite obviously dangerous cycle to be in a position where you're basing what you do on what other people think of you or what you think other people think of you or what people have said to you. But
Hmm.
it's not an uncommon thing. But I think it does, particularly when it comes to chronic illness, a lot of goal setting. Like when I looked, I had an accident a couple of years ago, I broke my ankle, and I was trying to work out what my goals would look like as I was recovering from that. And it was a lot of stuff that I was reading online. It was all about getting to a sense of what is considered to be like normal, which is not the same for me as a disabled person as it is maybe for someone who
Hmm.
isn't. And I thought that was quite interesting that there seemed to be a huge focus on goal setting people who are disabled might look like being able to say return to work, which is still a completely valid goal and was a goal that I
Hmm.
had set for myself as well. But it's about fitting inside of things in a certain way rather than about maybe I think a great goal is pacing your energy,
Hmm.
or understanding your health conditions better. I don't necessarily think it needs to be a goal of I'm going to do this so that I'm productive in a societally acceptable way.
100%. Yeah, I think so much of like our goal setting in the way society is structured is about like suppression, like power through, suck it up. And like that can only work for so long. And even for somebody who doesn't live with disabilities or chronic illness, like eventually you will hit a wall. That's just not, yeah, I think it's also like our goals and our capacities are going to fluctuate throughout our lives. Like that's that's okay. Sometimes there's gonna be some moments in our lives that are just so stressful. There's just so much going on that like our capacity is just less, and that's okay. I think we need our goals. There needs to be a bit of a dynamic nature to like how we approach things in general. And we'll by doing that, by checking in with our bodies, are really assessing where we're at, I think we're gonna be more productive in the long run. Like we're be more likely to stick with what we want to accomplish.
Yeah, and the capacity fluctuating, like maybe getting a bit bigger at times or getting smaller. I think that's so important. So when you're setting that goal, you're bearing in mind if something was to happen and my capacity was to get smaller, can I still do something towards this goal? And likewise, if it
Yeah.
gets bigger, can I expand it? Is there flexibility in this goal so that it's always going to be, or as much as possible, is always going to be achievable for me?
Yeah, I think that's really important to like and to consider like our neurobiological like limits. I think that was really helpful for me to even just map out like physically like how much can I lift before have symptoms, you know, how much cognitively, like emotionally, energetically, like psychologically. We're all going to have different limits and we're going to and they could also just fluctuate depending on, you know, if you're menstruating, depending like or other hormones, depending on your like if you're having a flare, but like really like thinking that through is also helpful for like kind of structuring the framework of your goals, you know? Like physically, like I can't really lift that much. Like I'm not going to have a goal. I would like to get into weightlifting one day, but it's going to be a very, very tiny goal. While I, you know, maybe like lifting like a pound while I'm walking or something, you know? Like we have to like think about where we're at, our limits. No, yeah, recognize that they can fluctuate, but recognize also that like our limitations are like there's different categories of it. You cognitively you may just not be maybe more limited one day, but physically maybe you're okay. So having kind of been able to be dynamic with our goals, but also maybe being able to be dynamic with our approach.
Yeah, thinking about maybe is there a day like you said there, like if you're having a better day cognitively, there's something you could do if you're struggling physically. So you still feel like you're working towards that goal and you still are working towards that goal, but it is
Hmm.
taking into account that, your capacity fluctuate. I think that would help with motivation as well. Because something that I've always struggled with goals is if I wasn't able to do something or achieve it, particularly if it was a health related, I'd often feel really frustrated about that and then feel kind of down
Hmm.
about it. But actually that reframing it and having those different ways of achieving it, I think is really important.
Yeah, there's so many different ways to show up, right? Like that's the thing too, is it's not a narrow, if we, yeah, we can't physically do, maybe you're in bed bound one day, but like maybe you have the emotional capacity to do something else, right? And so really looking and being like, that's okay that this part of me needs to rest, but like, what else can I do where I'm excited or feeling like I'm productive in some way?
Yeah, like the act of progress might look different on different days, but there is still progress there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Totally. I remember like reading an article years and years ago about someone wrote about they always made their bed when they were going through a really like serious bout of depression. And that was like an accomplishment that if nothing else, they woke up in the morning and made their bed. And that always just struck me as like, yeah, there's always little things that we can do that still can mean something depending on where we're at in our lives in that moment.
Yeah, definitely for me, like I'm a big like making the bed. It's just because you got that to-do list. And if on my bad days, if it's just making the bed, just ticking it off is satisfying.
Hmm.
I put
Hmm.
I put things on my to-do list just so I can tick them off, but it is satisfying, like knowing you've achieved that something, and it gives a sort of sense of, for me at least, normality and routine that helps me on those difficult days.
For sure, me too. And I also am a big like I love physically checking things off. I've tried the different apps, but I love like writing things down on a notebook and like crossing it off. It's very
Yeah.
satisfying.
Yeah, it's almost as satisfying as getting the goal done. Like maybe sometimes I'm like,
Hmm.
actually, let's just like write this one down just so I can check it off.
For sure, whatever works.
So we've spoken quite a lot about like the nervous system and regulation. And I know you have used a lot of different tools to help people and support them in kind of regulating their nervous system a bit better. And I was just wondering if maybe in particular to goal setting, is there anything that comes to mind that you think is important tools you could use maybe when setting the goal, or if you're struggling while during the goal?
Yeah, so I think one, understanding kind of your neurobiological limits, because trying to stay within that is going to be helpful for or being aware of your limits are going to help you when you're trying to stay within like your window of regulation. And then I think being really kind of clear on like what kind of nervous system states you tend to kind of, what are your default strategies? So if you tend to, for example, kind of get like a lot of mobilizing energy and get really like kind of in your fight or flight, sympathetic and really like overwhelmed, get angry, get anxious or whatever, you might want to like kind of work on tools that can help you to like regulate, feel like safe. So there's different, you can do like touch is really nice. I really personally love like touching the forehead, touching the back of the neck as a way to kind of tell your body that you're safe. We have a lot of like sensory information from our body goes to our brain. Shaking can be really good to like get rid of any like mobilizing energy or heel drops if you're kind of in a flight kind of feeling. But a lot of this comes from just also being able to really like recognize your nervous system state. It's gonna look different. What like an exercise that works for one or a tool that works for one person may not work for another, but it's really like a little bit of trial and error to experiment and also to be able to check in with your bodily sensations. I think a lot of us are like really almost just disassociated from how our body feels. And sometimes it's a natural thing we do when we have chronic illness of like not wanting to like think about our body. But it is kind of something that can be valuable to be able to check in and be like, how am I like what's going on? Like what is like my heart feeling like? Am I having some sensations? I think really being aware of how our body feels so that we can apply the right tool. And that may even be like if you're in pain or whatever, to like look at like connecting to your environment as well. Is there ways that I can connect ground, my feet to the ground? Is there ways that I can feel connected to what's outside of me as well? Different tools. That's a bit of a ramble, but it really depends on where you're at. I think one is just like trying to understand your nervous system states and then understanding what's going to like regulate and feel good for you.
Yeah, I think that step of being present in your body when maybe it hasn't always felt like the most comfortable place to be, or when you're in pain, we can often, like as you said then, we normally do kind of separate ourselves almost from it because we're in pain, we're struggling.
Yeah.
And that's an understandable response, but it's taking yourself back, sort of almost within your body and giving yourself permission to connect with your body, to understand what you're going through. I think that probably that journey in itself of going to a place of actually being ready to do that and then experiencing it, I suppose that is probably a very large, before you even get to the goal setting, having to build up to that, get to that position, and then building and doing that work.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize because then you can also catch yourself when you are, it just say you like have like perfectionism tendencies. If you're really able to check in and be like, okay, I recognize when I have more mobilized energy. I recognize when I'm feeling dysregulated. I recognize when I'm feeling shame. You're also able to keep yourself better on track when you're going through the goals. And if you're noticing that you're maybe getting, you're experiencing dysregulation or you're getting yourself burnt out or you're experiencing a lot of symptoms or more flares because of that goal, we need to this helps us to kind of make sure we're doing manageable steps towards that, stretching ourselves, but not like overexerting ourselves.
Yeah, and constantly checking in to make sure that the goal is going at a pace that's right for you and you're not feeling that as much as possible, kind of avoiding that external pressure to push yourself beyond those limits because it's not going to lead
Hmm.
to a sustainable goal. And I think that that's really important.
Yeah, and I think I was also thinking about it's just like how like important language is too. I think that sometimes when we've experienced pain or like some pretty bad chronic conditions for so long, it's easy to get into that like mindset of like it's never going to get better, like I can't do that because of my pain, or to like, and I think language is very important in how we also certainly I think it's important to our nervous system, but it's important like yeah to like our ability to progress, and I've really noticed a big difference in being able to move forward in things in my life when I stopped using certain language and stopped catastrophizing like the future of like it's going to get worse. I will get worse. I will be in pain forever. And just if I am in pain, just be like, all right, my body's saying it needs a break. That's okay. It does not mean that this is going to be forever. And so I do think that there is a bit of mindset work that is valuable. And it's not to like gloss over and say that what your experience is not valid or that it's not frustrating. But I think not seeing it as like this is an indication of all this means XYZ when really just means you need to take a break.
Yeah, and not seeing when you can't do something or when you don't feel you're productive enough as representative of your worth and separating how much you're
Yeah.
worth from how much you can do. I think that's really important. That was a big step for me.
I think that's true. But honestly, I think that's really tied into like capitalism and the way our society is structured, that we see worth like linked to like success, and success only looks a certain way. I think one of the beautiful things about chronic illness, I think that yes, there's limitations and there is a loss of identity and there's a lot of struggle, obviously, but there's an opportunity to redefine like what success looks like for you. And I think that's really powerful.
I agree completely. I think it is powerful because you get that opportunity to sort of think, what do I want? Not just what is society telling me I should want. What do I actually want? What do I want my life to be like? And I think that is a good way to look at it. And I do think about that a lot, that my life has definitely been shaped by my experiences. So I've been disabled since birth. So like it's literally been shaped since birth. But I
Mhm.
think I don't know if I'd have made some of the same choices had I not have had the experiences I've had. And it's difficult to live in chronic pain. It's definitely difficult, but I do have such a
Mhm.
beautiful life. And there's so many, like I'm having this conversation with you right now. We wouldn't maybe have had this conversation because I wouldn't have maybe started this podcast. So there's all these experiences that I get to have because this is the way that my life has gone. And there's so much beauty in that. Like there is difficult things and there are days I still struggle, but there is so much beauty as well.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's so true. There's a lot of, I think it causes you to have to reflect more and I think create like a lot more self-awareness. And it's not, I think that, and there's so many people who maybe don't live with chronic illness or disability are able to achieve a certain level of success. And some may really enjoy it and some don't. Some people get burnt out and think like, that's not really what I wanted. Life is a lot about like, we try things out. We're like, oh, is this what I want? Is what I not want? And I think that like, anytime you're doing things for others, it may not always work out the way that you think. And yeah, when you can't do things, when you have limitations, like I was joking with a friend about it that like one of my biggest things when I like, started experiencing fibromyalgia was like, oh, there's all these things won't be able to do. Like I won't be able to like rock climb and I won't be able to like climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I won't be able to do all these things. And then I had to like really think about it. And I was like, realistically, like I've also had chronic pain since I was a kid. I'm like, was I gonna actually do rock climbing or climb Kilimanjaro? Probably not. Sometimes when you're told you can't do something, there's a bit of like anger, or like, oh, like I'm limited. And then you're like, but now I can focus my energy on things I actually can do and want to do. There is sometimes, like the rejection is redirection, and that actually can kind of be a better use of energy. Like, okay, these things are not possible, but like other things are.
Yeah, and thinking about what can I do now and what do I want to do now and what have the experiences I've had shaped me in a way that's different and maybe actually particularly with goal setting, a goal that you've set for yourself and you thought this is it, this is the absolute goal I have. Maybe that changes over time as well. Maybe you get to a point or your health changes and you were actually maybe working on a goal and you develop a health condition and perhaps it is career related, but you realized now with a different change of perspective, you want something completely different. And you have that power to kind of say, right, this was my goal, but I'm going to redirect that now and choose a different path from that.
Yeah, and like life is about experiences and what you do with those experiences. Like, I don't know, I always think like it's kind of strange that at 18 you have to kind of decide what you're going to do for your life. And there's so many things that come like, AI, technology, all these things that come up that people are like, oh, that's interesting. I'd like to change my career. And I think experiencing chronic illness is similar to like having a career change, you know? You have new information, you have new experiences, and you're like, what else is out there? We're constantly, I think it's a choice to decide like, oh, I'm going to really like see what other experiences are possible given who I am in this moment.
Yeah, I think that like fluidity of life, like especially because like you said, like at 18, you're expected to know exactly who you want to be when you're going to like university, college, expected to pick a course that's going to be the career for the rest of your life. But actually people change their careers all the time. People find their
Yeah.
passion in, their 40s, their 50s. You don't know at 18. I mean, I'm 28. I don't know at 28. And I think it changes. I think that that's quite powerful, particularly because the way that education is set up means that people are kind of almost taught, well, what you decide to do now is just going to be your path. That's what you're going to do. But actually realizing that you get to choose a different path at any point that you want, and you always have that power. That's all like that ability to say, I wanted this, now I want this. That's always yours. And I think that's quite, for me, it's quite, makes me feel really excited for the future because I know that I love what I'm doing right now, but it's like, well, in 5 years, I could be doing anything and I could be loving something I would never even thought of before.
Yeah, it's beautiful. There isn't a set path. Like I have family members in their 60s who are starting out another career. Like, why not? There's so many different things. Like the opportunities are kind of endless. And we're kind of, yeah, it's honestly it's bonkers to me at 18. You're told like you got like your brain isn't even fully developed and you're supposed to like decide what you want to do for the next 4 or 5 years or the rest of your life is how it's kind of phrased.
Yeah, there's so much there to take away from this. So I'm kind of interested to know, have you set yourself any goals at all for the new year?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one. So I do actually want to get it more into movement, but particularly I would like to try strength training and weightlifting. It's something that I've been like very afraid of for many years with like living with chronic pain. And I'm recognizing the value of like, yeah, just for my core and actually think it would improve my symptoms. So I've decided I'm gonna work on a plan to slowly incorporate strength training into my exercising. How about yourself?
That sounds brilliant. Yeah, I think mainly I just want to, there's a couple of like goals I set myself next year. I definitely feel like self-compassion and people talking about self-compassion has been made me think I probably want to work on that for myself. So have a little bit more self-compassion. And I want to continue learning Welsh. Who knows? By the end of the next year, I might even be able to say a few sentences.
Yeah,
Maybe that's the
totally.
goal. But yeah, I think having fun with it and just sort of experiencing it and really getting back to the taking that pressure off myself and realizing that the goals I set myself are often because I really want to do them and I'm excited for that and being more present in the journey, which is something I've really taken away from our chat today, just how important it is to be present in that experience of actually working towards that goal and be open to different options and different opportunities.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that like for no, I think language is like such a fun journey. Honestly, just as one more point for the language learning, I also found it really helpful to like incorporate music, like movies, just like all different types of I do sticky notes all around my house. I just try to give myself this like immersive experience and it's made it, poetry, like all the things. And it's really kind of fun when you can, rather than just sit and be like, okay, I'm gonna conjugate verbs for an hour. Like that may not, it's also not that exciting to do. I didn't enjoy that in school. I don't enjoy it as an adult. So I'm just curious, like, what does self-compassion look like for you? In what ways?
I think, oh yeah, it's a really good question. I think it does. It is almost in some ways in relation to goal setting, and I think perhaps in relation to perfectionism, is I put a lot of
Mm,
pressure on myself to achieve things, and I put these standards that are just way too high. And it's almost an element of, do I put them so high so that I don't ever actually achieve them? Because then what would happen? What would I do next? But no, there is that element of
hmm
acceptance of where I'm at right now. I've got like a lot of health challenges that have come up recently that I'm still sort of working through and processing, and I don't want to do this, but I get into a cycle of sort of thinking, okay, just don't think about it, distract yourself. But actually, self-compassion for me is sitting with those realities a little bit longer. Like it might not be the most
hmm
comfortable thing, but actually having the compassion to say, this big thing is happening to you and it sucks. It's not okay that it sucks, but it's okay to feel like that about it, and it's unfair, and you're going to still get through it. And having that compassion of myself, actually letting myself sit with those feelings rather than just sort of pushing them away and thinking, I'm not going to think about that. That's what it looks like for me. And hopefully that's a goal I'm striving towards already. So yeah, something I'm quite keen to bring more of into my life because we can be our own worst enemy sometimes.
No, I love that. That's so, and it really like also what we were talking about earlier about like worth. I think to me, like I love it. Like, yeah, when something feels really disappointing, I think it's okay to like sit with that grief, but also decouple it from your worth and be like,
Mm.
yeah, like it's okay to feel upset when something upsetting happens, but as long as you don't like like yeah, prescribe that as like this is like who I am. This is like this is, or make it as an indication of what the rest of your life is going to be like, then but yeah, it's okay to, and yeah, I think self-compassion, honestly, it seems like a fluffy thing to say, but like I think it's key to like accomplishing. I think it's even key to feeling better. I think it's like even for our symptoms, it's a really difficult but important, I think, component of moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really, for me, fundamental, definitely a journey. I think that we probably all go through periods where we may be more compassionate at times towards ourselves, and then times where we're not as compassionate. But I do think it's always a good idea to strive to be as compassionate to yourself as you are to others, even when that's hard.
Yeah, we are usually more compassionate to others than our than ourselves. That's definitely true.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been absolutely lovely talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been like really great chatting with you as well.
To learn more about Caitlin's work, check out the links in the description. Give us a follow to keep up to date on the latest episodes. And as always, thanks for listening.